Reservoir Dogs, Script and Screenplay Analysis by Sean McHugh, Part 5 of 12. How is the breakfast diner color-coded? The team choose from seats with orange upholstery, then choose from menus with orange covers, all as reflecting any actions they choose, resting on or being subsets of orange, the traitor, and everything going to the police. Next to the menus is orange ketchup for them, likewise, all to take with what they order, again as orange's mockery of them. Then the orange notice board, which no one notices, is filled with 2 copies of the menu, of 3 sheets each for the 6 store robbers, where the color drowns out the writing for everything as compromised. The menu style here recalls the Stealers Wheel record cover, while their Stuck in the Middle with You song is orange, all as with Nash stuck between the robbers and the police. One of the notice board menu sheets has a white highlight bar as white, with a smaller white bar crossing from the next attached sheet as orange, encroaching into his life, while a separate third sheet has a white bar as blonde, excluded from the couple. This parallels Joe's office right side white elephant tusk encroaching from its black as orange background onto its white as white background. Then there's a poster by the notice board advertising a festival and carnival as the film's following chaos and craziness with orange, blonde, and white balloons, while the word carnival is cognate with carnal alongside the diamond store name Karina. Accordingly, behind Eddie's car as he drives to the warehouse for the first time after the robbery is an orange balloon bouncing down the road with orange central lines, reflecting Orange's life and, by extension, the rest of the team that he's betraying, as out of control, not going very far, full of air, and about to burst. In this shot is also an army recruitment office, now closed, as Orange being rejected from there due to his sexuality, and instead making his way to the police. Then there are 2 blonde warning signs for Eddie to notice, as Blonde's violence at the store so far, and Nash's torture to come. The office sign is in white with orange-red lettering on a white wall, while the for lease signs, along with a man walking by, are in black and white, in parallel with orange as policemen clearly being on lease to white and to the robbers. Moreover, in the stationary car conversation, the girl walking in front is also in black and white, but white only jokes about her. Orange's apartment is just off this street, for him to notice the offices, as revealed when Eddie collects him for the planning meeting, and where the building next to the office has an orange banner. Both shots of it have the same blonde car with white patchwork parked outside as the other 2 gay men, while cars either side of it are gray, as their sexuality's gray area. Another 2 breakfast orange notice boards have whiteboard notice boards hung over them, as the white and orange relationship to be noticed. The boards over each other reflect the relationship physically and mentally, with white subtly covering for orange and hanging over orange in dominating Orange's thinking, then nursing him. The partially hidden double-double boards are the white-orange relationship, plus the orange-robbers relationship, both of which the robbers should be noticing. The boards further parallel White's coffin's layers of identity. The whiteboards have writing on, including the word special at the top in orange ink, plus blue below for the day's meal deal, in reference to Mr. Blue's association of special service with phallic oral sex, as white and orange are engaged in, while the word blue also references sexual activity. Blue has a phallic cigar in his mouth, both his speech and actions issuing from subliminal awareness of the phallic sexual relationship going on, and he replaces it to become long again as an erection by the end of the Like a Virgin story with its repeated dicks. The only other smokers there are the gays, blonde and orange, while White with a toothpick in his mouth throughout the scene, and walking outside is Blue's oral phallic talk applying to him. Outside, Blonde puts a new cigarette to his lips in another parallel with White, where Blonde is presented immediately after him, and Blue retains his second cigar, but which has gone short again as the erection lost after Brown Stick story. Moreover, on the near notice board, there's also a white paper of 2 columns of printing, with an image intruding into both, again referencing the sexual pair, while the ketchup bottle has a white top and white label over the orange sauce. Brown says that another Madonna song, True Blue, is indeed outwardly truthful, all as Mr. Blue's connotations are truthful, while Eddie likewise expresses from his subconscious that it was a big-ass hit for Madonna, as gay sex involving hitting asses. Orange asks how the True Blue song goes when it's concerned with pure love, and he's planning to betray his love partner, reflecting him not knowing how to be truthful. Blue then mentions Madonna's song Borderline about a risky interracial relationship as connecting with White Criminal in terms of Policeman Orange, along with Orange's borderline or just passable undercover acting. He then moves to Papa Don't Preach about the unintended results of a relationship, again as connecting with both White, calling Joe Papa in their office meeting, and at the end Joe's unwittingly condemning of White's sexual partner. Here are the song's lyrics, I'm Keeping My Baby. Connect with Orange being a parallel of the carjacked woman driver's baby, which she insists on keeping or defending, with White again as the woman insisting on keeping his relationship with Orange as a baby on the floor against Joe. The warehouse situation repeats the carjacking situation, comprising 4 people, where one armed person defends an unarmed person against an armed hostile pair, either White and Orange or Joe and Eddie. Moreover, Blue says he liked Madonna's early songs, but then tuned out with her Papa Don't Preach phase, all as he's here meeting White and Orange, but dies before Joe's preaching phase. Weakly imaginative Eddie, shortly after, parallels Blue's tuned-out phrase when saying he's zoned out in failing to notice the end of his song, as reflecting him failing to notice through to the end Orange as either undercover lover or policeman. The diner's walls, ceiling, 2 doors, and other tables are white, reflecting White as the dominant figure in the background relationship with Orange, and between the couple sitting together is a white phallic column wider at the base, plus nearby an indistinct orange lettered notice on a white background and white pole for the indistinct relationship. The robbers use a brown table and drink from brown cups and 2 brown beer bottles, reflecting Brown's overarching comments, though with only Brown twice seen drinking from a cup as his story consuming them, while there are several blonde cups near the ketchup, alongside the waitress's blonde and white dresses, for Blonde's similar sexuality and centrality. The clearest shot of Brown with his cup is also with the beer bottles positioned equally and prominently either side of the ketchup and orange menus for the white and orange phallic relationship that he subconsciously speaks of. The bottles compare with fallacies in their heads having separating ridges, plus widening neck shafts, and where the rest is out of view, while further comparing phallic poles and bollards elsewhere. They're also seen immediately before Blue with his phallic cigar to his mouth. A white cooling fan in the background references White trying to keep everyone present cool in terms of presupposing his background relationship's non-existence. His protection of it deflects his suspecting of it, however, and thence one of the background doors is wide open, reflecting White's guileless openness to it. The fan has 3 vanes, casting gray shadows on the white wall for the 3 gay men. It also has blue and orange writing in the center, in parallel with the blue and orange writing on the white notice board, and is next to Blue, who speaks in connection with this. Further, the film begins with shots of the backs of Brown, Orange, White, and Joe, obscuring the others, as these having the most to hide, where Brown, as Tarantino, being the first, is deceiving the audience over the tiny extent of his involvement in the ultra-complex script, screenplay, and directing. Then there are plants in orange pots with orange-red flowers, as Orange being a plant in the team, the most prominent being immediately behind Eddie, as him most vehemently denying the setup, again indicating the robbers' inability to be in touch with their senses and think holistically and properly. Meanwhile, black ceiling and wall beams on white are the structure, again in black and white. Then next to the notice board is a framed newspaper article, as they'll soon be featuring in, while relating to the man reading a newspaper outside the drugstore washroom. A painting behind Brown of sacks of oranges suggests Orange making a harvest out of the heist, and a sign on a door behind Eddie reads, "Step down," in white on orange, as him succumbing to the various mistakes, while comparing with oversize on White's coffin. As they leave, Joe stops to give the tips to the diner manager, wearing a white shirt, black tie, and black trousers, the same as the 6 robbers, to suggest via Pink's reasoning against tipping that he's robbing them. As with choosing from all orange seats and menus, the 8 robber actors' names are credited after the breakfast in orange font as being completely undermined by Orange as undercover policeman, while the accompanying song that looks for happiness is also about him. Furthermore, the actor for the major part of Orange is incongruously introduced last, after White, Blonde, Eddie, Pink, Joe, Blue, and Brown, before the other main characters of Orange's manager and Nash, as on Orange's side, are given without visuals, even while he brings them trouble and death out of his hidden relationship with White. Meanwhile, the names of the actors with individual shots of them walking, as still in their character roles, exemplify the film's undermining of the distinction between itself and real life. Moreover, the continual opening shots of out-of-focus backs of black heads announce the characters' subliminal awareness at the backs of their minds, prompting what is said, but which they never make proper sense of. This compares with the white lenses and illuminated orange bulbs behind at the back of Eddie's car, next to Orange and Pink's heads, and as positioned at the back of White's head, sitting at the front, with his outward attention there, as White subliminally thinks about traitorous Orange from what Pink says, while Orange keeps quiet. What does Orange's manager fail to think through when Orange tries not to answer questions about White? The police manager can see Orange is being casual yet self-conscious and obtuse, and has to work out from what Orange says White's hometown, name, and identity to build a case against him as part of the robbery sting, instead of Orange with his feigned enthusiasm doing it. However, Orange already knows all this, as White later admits to Pink in the warehouse, and many more personal details about White via his intimate relationship. But the manager doesn't begin to work this out, while Orange goes along with his instructions to make deductions from police records. Indeed, Orange's pensiveness and dejection at the instructions for producing evidence against his boyfriend also indicate that White telling Orange his name and where from was last night after they first met and had sex. Orange shows subtly elation about this in talking to his manager, while his reticence about the relationship parallels White's with Pink. If the manager could think and understand Orange's tardiness, he'd have the option of trying to put the romantic relationship to good use, despite any misgivings. Although he sees Orange pause with evasion, he fails to consider what this may mean, and that with an altered and more complex allegiance compromising the role, if Orange won't then reliably agree to working against White via his personal relationship with him, he should be replaced and the operation rethought. Notably, when Orange enters this evening diner, he opens a door from the outside designed as an exit door and marked with a large red, orange, and white exit sign, referencing gay sex with the anus and output, before declaring "I'm up his ass" and saying he's been accepted on the team. It should be as black and white to the manager as his and Orange's ethnicities. Further, the breakfast diner features a black-on-white exit sign behind the white Ullen, while the bar features a green-on-white sign and adjacent white-on-green sign, plus a white section next to it, as also referencing White's concern for money via Eddie at the breakfast, calling dollars green. The evening diner door and adjacent window have white and blonde posters for the other gay men, plus blue as meaningless over one of the blonde, while a larger purple poster is Joe's reference to homosexuality via Pink's attempted name change at the planning meeting. There are also 2 men sitting, dressed in orange and white, plus black, for the manager to further think about, while all customers drink from white cups, as White being betrayed. The manager at the start subliminally senses Orange is being less than truthful, saying, "This better not be some kind of Freddy joke," but never considers properly that Orange has gained a robber boyfriend, despite likely prior indication of the lack of any partner. The manager tries to be tough with him to find out just how things are going, but Orange's evasiveness wins out, and the manager relaxes too soon. The view from back of his head, as with the men at the breakfast diner, is for subliminal thoughts in back of his head, which never materialize in his mind properly. In their diner and then roof and graffiti building meetings, Orange is likewise as casual as possible to keep his manager at ease, and with added confidence in the deception working, while the over-relaxation also betrays trying to reconcile to himself his new unprofessional relationship. The operation is dealing with armed robbers and killers, and deaths and injuries could have been averted if the manager had been sharper than he thinks he already is. His appearance announces affinities with 1960s left-wing activists, having a Che Guevara t-shirt in socialist red, plus Guevara Chinese Communist Party hat, and a Malcolm X-style beard aligned with his ethnicity. This indicates treating employees more in terms of structural positions than as individuals with defining characteristics, including different sexualities to consider, and hence that he's not interested in Orange's aberration, while some socialist perspectives are strongly disapproving. Then Pink in the warehouse asks White and Blonde rhetorically if they've worked with niggers or ethnic blacks, as he has, as always wanting to kill each other. But Orange nearby indeed is working with one, whose weak operational planning then results in many killings, including Orange. He's noticed but hasn't understood their animosity, including their exchange at breakfast, where Blonde offers Joe to kill White and gives White a finger gun. Pink says blacks as antagonistic are like White and Blonde, but by contrast he most sounds like one in his style of rapid delivery, while Joe similarly shows disdain for blacks with the term jungle bunny when talking to Blonde. Among the black manager's prominent errors is providing Orange the drug story, showing him to be a criminal who keeps cool under pressure, but when he'd already secured his place on the team, and after Eddie accepted a referral for Orange from Long Beach Mike, saying he was a good thief who didn't rattle or say things he shouldn't. Instead, the drug story only causes suspicion and contributes to Orange being shot 3 times, but it's further unnecessarily accepted by Orange in the roof meeting on a following day. Orange has got past the edgy evening meeting, where the manager failed to see the issue with White, and he's much happier on the roof, but serious trouble is now emerging. Moreover, this letting his guard down repeats after him and White get past the store, and White kills the car policeman prior to Orange getting shot. While Orange saying that Long Beach Mike said he's a good thief suggests Orange gained this phrase from White last night during their intimacy, with White describing his former woman partner to Joe in his office meeting as a good little thief. However, contrary to Pink implying to White and Blonde, plus Orange, that niggers kill each other in contrast to whites, White, as emphasizing being an ethnic white, kills Orange plus Joe and Eddie and the 2 white car police, while Orange kills Blonde plus the white car driver, and Pink fires and at least hits white police with lethal vehemence. Eddie also kills Nash, while Blonde and Joe try, if fail, to kill people, although Blue plus Brown and Nash presumably kill no one. White, Pink, Brown, and Blue are killed by police, who are likely white, as from the 4 police chasing Pink, plus the 4 imagined washroom sheriffs all being white, while the robbers also kill civilians and police at the store, as presumably white, where the only black killed, as highlighted by White, is then a defenseless young woman by ethnic white blonde. Indeed, of the 10 characters, the black manager is the only one not killed, while the black woman at the store and 2 further blacks in Eddie's phallus story kill nobody, again in opposition to Pink's view of blacks. In parallel with the black who survives at the end after causing many deaths from bad planning. However, Eddie says Blonde walked out of prison like a black, where Blonde then allowed most of the robbers to initially survive through his shooting spree and deaths. Moreover, with the extra reference to whiteout of his name in Pink's notion of whites contrasting with blacks, he should be paying particular attention to the unfolding situation as heading towards him and killing his fellow whites, yet he's too lost to his emotional vortex. Then Orange, taken as Mr. Black, as Joe speaks of at the planning meeting as the group's starkest, most treacherous, and baddest member, is also the nigger, as Pink describes, that they're all effectively working with, who will be instrumental in causing them to kill each other. Furthermore, the manager beyond Orange is the ultimate Mr. Black, and indeed the only black man involved, as responsible for him and the whole sting operation's disastrous organization. Orange, in subliminal recognition of where his situation is headed, mentions to his manager the Fantastic Four comic superheroes, and they speak of 3 of them that compare with Orange, Nash, and Blonde in the torture scene. The invisible woman, who becomes invisible and projects force fields, is Orange, being an undercover and lover and womanly, plus silently affecting White's actions. The Human Torch, who can generate flames, is Nash, after his petrol dousing. And the Thing is a blonde-colored, grumpy monster, even while Orange compares it to Joe as reflecting Joe's subtle links with Blonde, particularly via his wall painting. The fourth member, Mr. Fantastic, is the group's father figure, which translates to the manager who Orange is talking to directly. But he doesn't think clearly either, and only indulges Orange's metaphor. Orange's fantasy world away from reality catches up with him. He learns nothing from it all, as with his drug story, and instead it complements his immature and messy interpersonal relationships along with messy apartment. After the carjacked woman shoots him, he asks in surprise, "Who'da fucking thought that?" in contrast to his worries about being shot at the robbery, but the answer being people who live in the real world and think and aren't lost in their fucking. He's then confined to the warehouse and the torture scene. The monster also connects with Blonde as the monster truck extravaganza behemoth that the radio station mentions, being a centerpiece attraction as applied to the film, with Blonde's centerpiece torture scene. While the truck the men walk past after breakfast is blue, and the Thing wears blue trunks, as both reflecting Blonde's ultimate demise and meaninglessness in parallel with blue. Then in Orange's apartment, while the Sandy Rogers song's childhood references are heard, there is a fleeting shot of toys of the Thing and of another superhero, Iron Man, as Orange, a man of iron, yet with its layout of orange and blonde colors close in form to the Human Torch, as Orange and Blonde interacting with Nash. The box for the Thing is beneath a related poster on the wall, with the toys reflecting his subliminal mental wanderings over his fateful situation, while Thing is a Shakespearean euphemism for phallus. Moreover, the Thing is a reference to the Thing film of 1982 that influenced Reservoir Dogs in its group of 12 men working together, cut off from society, who know one of them is a traitor in disguise and are progressively killed, and with mistrust and complex interaction a key part of the tension. The traitor, or Thing, is also a shape-shifting monster with an alien internal makeup, comparing with Orange's different outward to inward sexual personas. Then people in the Thing film being surreptitiously and intermittently taken over by a monstrous hidden force compares with White's and Orange's surreptitious allegiance and self-supportive actions out of the phallus or Thing that intermittently appears in them. The Thing monster in The Thing is that film's focus, and thence the Thing as monstrous homosexual relationship in Reservoir Dogs is its focus. Furthermore, there is a concept of the Thing in epistemology, or the inquiry into the grounds of knowledge, at the heart of Western philosophy and thought, where an object is conceived of as external to the mind and hidden behind sense data about it. Here, the mind only experiences the sense data, not the object directly, where this confused disjunction and loss of immediacy is equivalent to virginal reasoning over intuition, as Brown's Like a Virgin story examples. For the characters and the majority populations, directly lived life, clear understanding and contact with the world doesn't obtain and remains impossible out of their lower consciousness levels, where instead they fall for insane reasoning stacked on insane reasoning. Another related film influence is 12 Angry Men of 1957, again with a group of men sequestered, arguing, failing to see the truth, and with a matrix of background personal motives. Of Orange's other posters, where reality seen in terms of fantasy, and beyond their sexual references, Silver Surfer is a humanoid alien comic character who interacts with the Fantastic Four and betrays an exploitative force who he was aligned with. This reflects Orange, via his relationship with White, betraying his managers and police departments' exploiting of him in a perilous undercover role that even his watching police colleagues think is crazy. Then, the kamikaze cowboy poster adjacent to Silver Surfer is from the title of an autobiography by an actor in the A-Team television series of the mid-1980s, where Special Forces agents are likewise treated badly by their own command and have to keep incognito, all as Orange has to be incognito agent and lover. The childish incognito superhero interest partially explains his agreement to an undercover role in pretending to himself that he's one. When leaving his apartment, he speaks to his reflection in the mirror, in parallel to White doing the same later in the narrative, their selves staring back to no avail. Instead, his Silver Surfer poster as his gay but heroic identity is in the background, and he thinks he's Beretta, a plainclothes police detective in an eponymous television series of more make-believe. Then Orange has just put his fake wedding ring on, as also placing him in his regular charade state of mind regarding his sexuality, out of social disapproval. Moreover, he has an American football magazine as an all-male physical activity, and while memorizing his story, he walks with a baseball bat, which comes from White's interest in Wisconsin baseball that he recounts to his manager. The other two policemen likewise have role models, with Nash's possible Lee Marvin and the manager's Che Guevara. While as Pink beats Nash, he asks tauntingly if he likes being a hero. 23. What does Joe fail to think through when White tries not to answer questions about his former woman partner? The Joe and White office recruitment scene is the first in chronological order, and problems immediately build on Joe's pressured business finances, where he continues failing to detect White's sexuality across long-term relations and past jobs. The risks pass him by of White being placed in an all-men team, including where Joe himself will soon introduce him to Orange. Joe approves of White, but not of homosexuality, so doesn't link the two in his mind. Then he also uses aliases for his team, and effectively tells them to relate to each other furtively, while 4 of them will be young in contrast to White and Blue, where a senior and follower relationship dynamic can be provided. In parallel with Orange being uncomfortable with his manager later asking him about White, White in the office is uncomfortable with Joe asking about his previous heterosexual relationship ending. Both the manager and Joe pause momentarily, but don't think through what they're hearing and are taking in. Moreover, Joe wants the recruitment to go well and isn't looking to interrogate his friend, while he's also in casual clothes, in contrast to his suit when Blonde calls on him. If Joe didn't dismiss homosexuality so readily, including where he's subsequently concerned to keep Blonde's sexuality, plus psychopathy, and past criminal failure hidden from the others, he might apply more critical thinking to White. Instead, the elephant's white tusk on the white gauze background at Joe's face when they talk about White's woman again is White's phallus, where White is necessarily deceiving Joe and thence exploiting his robbery for his own emotional ends. In White's office meeting, the right side tusk on the gauze intrudes into the curtain, whereas in Blonde's office meeting, the left side tusk on the curtain intrudes into the white gauze. The tusk is for White's collapsed female relationship and emerging male relationship, but the metaphor becomes contemptuous, with White getting the better of Joe in intrusive phallic terms, and other sexuality encroaching in his business dealings. However, the notion of the phallus being exploitative by nature is another indication of the culture's failure to understand the equality in sex of the man necessarily giving himself through his partner's claim on his attention. Indeed, he literally gives in material passing from him to his partner, while the dominant submissive dynamic between men and women, or men and men, is purely aesthetic. The scene opens with Joe's questioning about White's woman as indicating his subliminal awareness of an issue here. In the background is a white lamp obscuring another of Joe's paintings, which has, like the Saint Sebastian, a partial arch, as for White's partly hidden architecture of intentions. It's in a back room in parallel with the back of White's mind and life, and is next to a mirror angling its reflection away, in parallel with White not being at one with his sexuality, as also given by his use of and dislike of others using towards him homosexualized profanity. Then there's half a world globe, as again Joe having only half the picture, and connecting with the navigation globe on his desk and his inability to navigate successfully. Throughout the scene, however, the Saint Sebastian, as referencing Blonde and Nash, isn't visible, and only the Venice drawing referencing goods shipments, and hence the diamonds. Moreover, real life beyond the film is also given here, where White's partner, as a crook alongside White, leaves him for another crook, parallels the actor of White, whose wife, as an actress alongside him, leaves him for another actor. She had an affair with the other actor in the year before the film was finished after being married 9 years. Furthermore, White as crook going with Orange as partial crook for a short time that ends acrimoniously is also given in The Actor of White 9 years later, going with an artist for a short time that ended acrimoniously. As a result of the central love relationship, Joe's project becomes compromised not only by the emotional favoritism, but the bad luck of White's partner being a fraud, who then gained unwitting support from White. White anxiously moves the conversation on from his former partner, and subsequently, both fail to think through White mentioning that the man he formerly worked with to convert diamonds into money is doing a 20-year sentence for bad luck. Joe is likewise converting diamonds, yet when Orange is recruited, White and Joe repress subliminal worries about the luck he brings and White's own involvement in it. It costs them their lives in parallel with the 20-year sentence. Joe replies to White's talk of bad luck with, "I guess you can say that again." But indeed, it is happening again, and this time to Joe, who's saying the words. Joe hasn't met Orange yet, but there's a process in motion leading towards infiltration, as following White's previous criminal job with an undercover agent, and particularly after Blonde's monitored visit to Joe later, while White's sexuality will then support undercover Orange. Moreover, White speaks of the bad luck out of a subliminal concern over this process. Joe and Eddie, with White, attend Orange's recruitment meeting at a bar, before these four meet again only for socializing, and where Orange gives his drug story. After the recruitment, Orange says to his manager that he has to be grateful to Long Beach Mike for recommending him, but this is a cover for a more important recommendation from White out of White's desire to work with his new boyfriend, and as reinforced by the second bar meeting, likely arranged by White out of enthusiasm for Orange establishing a working relationship with Joe into the future. Orange and White know that homosexuality is unacceptable, respectively for the manager and Joe, while homosexuality in the manager's China was only legalized in 1997, 5 years after the film. The option of disclosing a homosexual relationship is discouraged by its disruptive favoritism, alongside the suggestion that either the policeman or criminal are only in their role initially because of sexual opportunities within the male scenes, and hence again are unreliable. Blonde, with no sexual relationship from just having left prison, shows a degree more honesty in his office meeting over what he must understand from the past to be Joe's homophobia, and is less wrapped up than White in his, who winces and touches his nose in indicating personal tension. Blonde's coffin wrapping is also increasingly torn open. What are Eddie's mistakes in joking with Blonde about gay sex? Eddie, in the office, jokes that Blonde has had gay sex in prison to affect his thought and speech, but by contrast, Blonde is relatively clear-thinking here, despite his suppressing the police following him to the Cabots, as indicated at the start with his tough parole officer, and thence Orange being planted and White meeting him. Blonde kept quiet to the police about Joe in prison, but then on release goes straight to him as fixated on getting back at society, and where the police then research into the Cabots. Rather than Blonde being confused, Eddie is indicating his subliminal awareness of what may well happen to White, after Eddie meeting with him again recently following Joe's recruitment of him when he's to be placed in a group of 5 other incognito men. And indeed, Eddie's inability to make sense of White's confusion in the end results in White killing him in defending his lover. Eddie doesn't consciously know that White is gay, so projects it onto Blonde here, who he does consciously know is gay, while he's particularly prompted into subsurface conflation in being under stress from Blonde's arrival with Joe, and Eddie hoping he wouldn't return, and not having reconnected with him in advance. Eddie first says, "I've had my head up my ass the whole time," which Blonde takes further as a joke about not knowing anything, subliminally reflecting the forthcoming White and Orange phallus heads in sex and their relationship across the whole of their time with the Cabots, and prefiguring Brown's Dick's story. Again, truth is spoken, but stays below the conscious level, while gay man Blonde also picks up on Eddie's words in calling Signetti his parole officer asshead, as referring to an anus as well as an animal. Moreover, before Eddie comes in, Blonde also calls Signetti a fucking asshole, out of awareness that Signetti has been assigned to him, because that's what Blonde is, both figuratively and literally, and needs a tough officer to deal with him. The phrase further recalls Pink's use of it running on the street, again with the gaze on the team subliminally on his mind. Joe also later says to Blonde, "It's kind of a strange time now," and Eddie, "Things are a little fucked up," in finishing Joe's sentence, both as further subliminal reference to the white and orange situation that will emerge and will further the existing business problems when Orange is recruited. Eddie's sexual metaphor for trouble and unraveling is literally true, where the fucking fucks them up, and aligns with the white elephant tusks. The two tusks are also pointing at the central white gauze in the background behind Joe's chair, as gay white in the background of Eddie's mind, while the tip of the left one finishes exactly at the gauze as Joe's right-hand man from his perspective on the forthcoming job. In the distant shots of the desk, the right tusk intrudes into the gauze as Orange to intrude into White's life. Joe has already given White his alias name by this point, as he does for Orange at his recruitment, and then Pink for the car journey. Then there's an elephant's foot in the corner, providing subliminal prompt for Eddie calling Blonde a rabbit's foot, as having brought good luck in the past, particularly from Eddie being under pressure to accommodate Blonde. However, Blonde was still caught, and while he does bring luck to the present job in his shootings, allowing robbers to escape, he once again doesn't pay enough attention to the possibility of police coming to the warehouse, instead being lost in his designs for Nash. Eddie says to Blonde, but in fact thinking of White, that Blonde walked into prison as a white man, but out sounding as a black, and speaks of black semen as from blacks he may have had sex with, but where semen is white. These are subliminal worries of White as becoming Mr. Black via soon to meet and have sex with Orange in the developing team, and indicating that although it should all be as clear as black and white, Eddie has it mixed up. Eddie's subconscious references to whites and blacks also compare with pinks, and then Eddie's subliminal talk in the car journey conversation. Moreover, Joe, at the start, in order to appease Blonde, tries to distinguish him from blacks as gratuitously violent towards innocent people, giving with the derogatory Jungle Bunny term, but while knowing in fact that it's Blonde providing Joe with this problem. Orange has the strongest claims to be Joe's team's Mr. Black, with his double undercover police and romantic roles bringing the most villainous results, where failing to separate work and love causes disaster and death, particularly in his declining to stop White's police killings and shooting a civilian himself. There's further a contrast between exploitative and unethical Orange as Black, and protective and ethical White as White, where Orange is then Eddie's talk of black semen pumped into White. Eddie projects White sexuality onto Blonde, which he can already deal with as in the open, while Joe, in a related way at the planning meeting, projects Blonde's sexuality, which here he wants hidden from the others, onto Pink. Neither Joe nor Eddie consider outwardly if anyone else on the growing team might be gay, nor explain White's subsequent jealous hostility to Blonde as parting of his partner Orange. Then Blonde, as standing for White here, makes a show of smoking a white cigarette with an orange filter, as White's thinking to be filtered through Orange, while Blonde also wears a white underlayer. Eddie, as better disposed than Joe and not objecting to Blonde's homosexuality in the office, wears a gray shirt and jacket, alongside his gray car exterior and interior, as subliminal reference to the intermediate position between the sexes, yet he never sees the wider situation. Then, as Eddie speaks of Blonde's homosexuality, Blonde first puts the unlit cigarette to his lips and removes it as a reference to oral sex and sucking, in parallel both with White's unlit cigarette to his lips as delaying tactic with Pink, and Blue's phallic cigar in his mouth. Furthermore, Blonde twice putting a finger to his ear as not listening when disagreeing with Eddie in the conversation references White, as comparing with Blonde in White's stationary car conversation, when speaking of cutting a finger off, in parallel with Blonde cutting Nash's ear off and not listening properly to Nash, as Blonde in fact being the one with the lost ear or not listening. Blonde's and White's similarities subtly confuse Eddie, while he further confuses Blonde with Pink in saying Blonde talks like a nigger when only Pink does, who is likely already recruited from what Joe and Eddie say about the developing team. Moreover, gay men White's and Blonde's office recruitments both involve exploitation of Joe, where the elephant tusks here are White looking for a love partner out of the job and Blonde looking for a policeman to abduct out of the job, sex and orgasm in parallel with torture and death. Where did Joe go wrong with Orange, and what did he fail to take from the drug story? Joe's primary mistake is not arranging to meet with Blonde on his prison release discreetly, away from his offices and away from direct police surveillance, to avoid them identifying his link with Blonde and thence investigating his operations and planting Orange. Without this, Blonde then comes to the office, disregarding the risks to all in his desires for an abduction. Indeed, the Cabots should have noted alongside Blonde, having had 4 years to think, that he got caught before, and so they need to circumvent him getting them all caught now. However, Joe's next mistake that most of the film's other mistakes rest on is not revising his decision to have Orange on the team following his drug story, as unnecessarily provided by his manager, as Joe gets to know him better in the bar scene. Joe fails to think through the wider trouble Blonde's unannounced visit may be bringing beyond the awkwardness that consumes his and Eddie's minds of not having been in touch with him recently, nor met him on release. Joe notices but accepts Orange's uncertainties, including having marijuana on him at a train station, finding 4 on-duty sheriffs together, with these being elected officers rather than regular police at a station, and them chatting in a washroom instead of leaving. Then he accepts Orange's delivery errors of repeating himself, giving unnecessary detail, and pausing to remember what to say, while also forgetting part of the story as practiced in his room and at the graffiti building. The actor of Orange here successfully acts subtly unsuccessful acting. Also, American counties have only 1 sheriff, while Orange says there were 4 Los Angeles County sheriffs, and not just deputies, as confirmed on their shoulder badges in the dramatization. Despite Joe squinting at and considering Orange at the end, he's sufficiently taken in while also failing to make sense of White's unqualified encouraging response in contrast to Eddie's questioning. Moreover, Joe would have cautioned White and Orange, as robbery team members, to avoid speaking of personal details alongside giving their aliases before all get them at the planning meeting, even while his main concern is for Blonde keeping quiet, yet Orange goes ahead with his drug story. 3 animal heads by green lights on the wall behind the 3 listeners suggest Orange looking to make them into trophies for his police money, while 6 sheets of writing and images washed out in the orange lighting as the 6 store robbers recall the breakfast diner notice board, and behind Orange, as in the breakfast and evening diners, is a phallic talum. His fake story is trying to show he can handle himself under pressure from breaking the law in having drugs to hide. But indeed, he really has his police and relationship identities to hide. He's impressing them while implicitly showing he could be doing similar hiding behind the words he speaks now. Indeed, Orange's opening words in the scene and for his story are, "This was a very weird situation," and which parallels Joe's equally subliminal comment to Blonde in the office, "It's kind of a strange time now." The story, whether false or true, means Joe should be highly wary of him, but he sees his mistake far too late, sucking on his white and orange cigarette as the white-orange relationship right before him that he's created for them, with the orange filter also, as his thinking still filtering through his mistaken presupposition about Orange's legitimacy. Joe trying to evaluate Orange becomes slow motion in this final return from the alternating story dramatization shots to the bar. White, moreover, knows Orange is hiding their relationship, alongside him hiding marijuana here, yet never considers if he could then also be hiding being a policeman. Orange dealing surreptitiously with his sexuality, though, apparently along with criminality when with people beyond the Cabots, gives White a partial explanation for the subtle weakness and awkwardness in the drug story. Behind Orange as he holds forth is an orange light. However, Orange is wearing his Mr. Black jacket and black t-shirt, plus black trousers and shoes for giving it at the bar, and not just for his part in the story has dramatized. All 4 wear black, but Joe has a brown jacket over when viewed from the rear, which changes color to blue when viewed from the front, for his failure to appreciate the meaning. Eddie has his gray jacket for homosexuality around him from the office, and White has white dots. The view from the rear of Joe's head and back recalls the same shots in the breakfast plus evening diners, and characters having thoughts only in the backs of their minds. White probably asks to accompany Joe and Eddie at Orange's recruitment bar meeting to meet Orange, with Joe also aware of Eddie's weaker judgment. And then Orange probably requests to White to suggest to Joe that the four socialize a second time, for him to give his drug story. Joe, however, continues failing to notice the undercover relationship, plus the police infiltration, while the meetings belie his minimal conversation policy for team members. He takes White's support of Orange only to be fatherly for a young, developing criminal, when by contrast they become lovers after the first meeting, as Orange indicates in the meeting with his manager the following evening. Moreover, Joe unnecessarily accepting the second bar meeting from White aligns with Orange unnecessarily accepting the drug story to give it there from his manager. To be continued. Reservoir Dogs. Any questions?